This wickedness of Sodom is widely known. Sodom had a reputation. Everybody was aware of it. And that's the idea of verse 13. The men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And everybody in the Middle East knew fine well what sort of a place Sodom was. Sodom then, as a wicked city, was a city under impending divine judgment. Now it doesn't go up in flames until Genesis 19. But already in Genesis 13 we're told it was wicked before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. The text even says that in verse 10. The people in Sodom were grossly immoral, and, as appears from Genesis 19, there wasn't a single righteous inhabitant in it. There wasn't one believer in the whole city until the day after our passage when Lot enters it. Not one believer in it. This was a city ripe for judgment. This was a city which had well nigh filled up the cup of its iniquity. And when it sought to rape the angels, that was the final straw. The last drop was added, and then the fire and brimstone rained down from heaven. Lot knew all this, but Lot pitched his tent towards Sodom all the same. Now, Lot's pitching his tent towards Sodom involves and indicates several things. First of all, Lot wants physical proximity to the city, and he wants some personal ties with it. And Lot's thinking, Sodom, with its wealth, is attractive. And the things of God, centered in the promise in Jesus Christ, in his consciousness, is coming a distant second. He has already fallen. This means too that Lot is exposing his family to the dangerous influences of the ungodly. Lot thought it out. Sodom has a reputation, well earned, as an evil city. I, Lot, do not want sodomy. I don't want it for myself. I don't want it for my family. But I do want, he may not have said this in so many words, but this is the case with him, I want wealth. I don't want sodomy, but I want wealth, and I'm willing to take a chance. I'm going to get as close to Sodom as I can without contracting any pollution. That was his intention. I want to be richer, so I'll persuade myself that I can get close to Sodom and yet avoid being infected. He's deceiving himself now. And in the narrative in the book of Genesis, Lot is on what we call a slippery slope. In chapter 13, he pitches his tent towards Sodom. By the time you get to chapter 14, he is living in Sodom. You see, there was a forward movement towards Sodom, and he just kept on going. And why live outside in a tent if you could be inside the city walls? And why be outside and some distance away from the people with whom you want to trade? Wouldn't it be far better just to get yourself a house in that immoral city? But not get too enamored with their ways. That was his thinking. In chapter 19, he's not just dwelling in Sodom, he's established in Sodom, and he is now a magistrate in the town. Presumably somebody voted him in. And then he has to pass judgment. How in the wide world are you going to pass judgment on issues in that town as a believer? Apart from agreeing with God that fire and brimstone ought to fall down upon him. And worse than that, his daughters have now married men of Sodom. This is the way it goes in general with backsliding. We embark upon a course of sin somewhat tentatively, and we seek to convince others, and worse, ourselves, that it isn't that big a deal, that there's nothing amiss, that we have good reasons for it, and it will never go too far. And then we become more confident and brazen in our sin, and we indulge our lusts and give them free rein as we run after here, money, or whatever it is. Another aspect of Lot's pitching his tent towards Sodom was that it involved separation from conscious spiritual fellowship with God. Now you know that God made his covenant with Father Abraham. The promise which was centered in Jesus Christ was made to Abraham. And Lot would have understood and knew, though he was trying to suppress this, that he would only experience Christ's redemption and the forgiveness of sins in fellowship with Abraham. God's blessing is on Abraham and on all those who bless him. And Lot needed the spiritual help and fellowship of his uncle. But he's willing to forego that. He slights Abraham's fellowship and pitches his tent towards Sodom. Thereby he indicates that he despises the God of the covenant promise. Not outright blasphemy, you understand, but in his mind he's made a choice. Fellowship with God and money, and he's gone with his inclinations and he sought wealth. He didn't write down the piece of paper, with me, money means more than the Church of Christ, but that's what he did. He neglected the promised Saviour, and he deprived himself and his family from the communion of the saints and fellowship with God's people, the church. We ought to be very clear that Lot did not pitch his tent towards Sodom as a result of Abraham's command. There is a command from Abraham in verse 9. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself. That's the command. Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. That's sort of a command, all right. But Abraham here was merely seeking physical separation between their herds because the land couldn't bear them both. Abraham sought physical separation in order to preserve their spiritual relationship. We are brethren. Abraham envisaged Lot taking one piece of land and he another, but then the two of them coming together periodically, frequently for communion. And he certainly didn't envisage Lot pitching his tent towards Sodom, and he didn't command Lot, Lot, go you there. He had the whole land, he could have went anywhere. So although Lot's pitching his tent towards Sodom came in the way of Abraham's command to separate, it did not occur because of Abraham's command. In short, Lot pitched his tent towards Sodom because of his covetousness. He saw the land was good. It had good soil, soil deposited by Jordan's yearly flood, at least the bit nearest to the river. He saw that it was, to quote verse 10, well watered everywhere, no arid bits. He saw that it was like the land of Egypt as thou comest unto Zoar.